welcome to the Weekly Artifact. This is a tri-weekly podcast created by two friends who met in undergrad and against all odds decided to keep talking to each other. I'm your host, Justin, joined always by my co-host, Alex, who once had the nerve to spit out a cookie sub sandwich I made for him.
It was so bad. Was it just the bread and the cookie?
It was just bread and cookie.
Yeah, you're a psychopath. I take it back. I'm right.
No.
Yes.
Your taste buds just weren't developed.
I'm Alex. The internet moves fast. The hot takes of today are less than a distant memory by tomorrow. We're here to slow down and recover the content that's been lost along the way in order to make sense of where the world was, where it is, and where it will be. To that end, we've each chosen an artifact from the web to discuss together.
Our comments are our own and are not associated with any institution. The show may contain explicit language or themes, so see the show notes for specific content warnings.
Justin, what do you got for us today?
So my artifact this week is a video called Incels from the YouTube channel ContraPoints, and it came out on August 17th, 2018. So it starts off, it kind of sets up the theme by going over a specific post from an incel group where they're talking about bone structure and how this causes them to be incels, which is a sort of a neologism for involuntary celibate or involuntary celibacy, basically meaning they feel like they are unable to have sexual relations. And so the idea of the bone structure is how it starts off, and that kind of becomes a theme throughout, but then it goes through and traces the history of the term incel, which actually begins with a queer woman named Alana, and she starts Alana's involuntary celibacy project, but it quickly or eventually gets taken over by a lot of mostly heterosexual men who sort of turn it into the toxic thing that we know it as today. And ContraPoints talks about their specific in-group language the incels have. For example, femoids as a way of dehumanizing women, and an important term, Chad, being men who are heterosexual men who are sexually active. So ContraPoints returns to the bone stuff, drawing parallels between the way incels think about the world and 19th century craniology, and that both are obsessed with bone structure and specifically skulls. ContraPoints suggests this may be sort of a trend that we can see with all groups that exhibit bigotry or self-loathing, because the skull is seen as being unchangeable. Although there are other subsets that will blame not their jawline or brow definition, but instead height or mental illness, drug addiction, wrist size, or even racism. Because I think incels are often portrayed as predominantly white men, which they are predominantly white men, but there are people of color that identify that way as well. ContraPoints then goes to the concept of the red pill. We'll talk about this more later, but that's kind of why I picked this artifact coming off of our last two, because it fits into the wider concept of the manosphere, which includes people that identify as pickup artists, men's rights activists, and separate group, which is similar to incels, called men going their own way. And a lot of these are the same types of people we see popping up in Gamergate.
Men going their own way is just incel cope, I think.
Yeah, probably. And this one of the central beliefs of being quote-unquote red-pilled, which is a metaphor related to the Matrix, which we can talk about.
There's nothing to unpack there, Justin.
Anyways, the red pill has nothing to do with the actual Matrix movie, but their version of it is that because of feminism, women are seeking partners that are above their own social status, and thus leaving these men who consider themselves to be lower social status to be doomed to be partnerless. Or if they do have a partner, eventually they'll be left for a quote-unquote Chad. But they believe that in a pre-feminist world, everyone would just partner with someone on their same level. This also assumes that everyone can be quantified somehow, that like your social status is like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, which is obviously also kind of questionable at
That's
best.
what a 3 would say.
And then ContraPoints also talks about the concept of the black pill, or what psychologists would call catastrophizing, which extends these ideas to suggest that the situation is unalterable. Basically, if you're partnerless now, you'll be partnerless forever. You should just give up on life, which is a worldview also assumes that being partnered is the only means of securing happiness, which again is questionable at best assumption. She talks about the obvious thought here is to just tell these men to get their lives together, make friends, try actually talking to women. And she even talks about how, as bad as someone like Jordan Peterson is, this is what some of his advice amounts to, and that perhaps he could meet these people where they are. But incels generally reject this advice, either suggesting that they already tried it, or that it will work for some people but not for them, again, because they don't have the right bone structure. ContraPoints acknowledges that on Tinder, for instance, everything about or any sort of dating app, it is true that women get more messages than men. As a transgender woman, she's been on both sides of that, but that the messages the women get are not necessarily like good messages, that they're often just viewing her as a sexual object and nothing else, but that could still be preferable to getting no messages, or at least she views it that way. And she's, as a trans woman who has done some body modification, or at this point was considering it, she's also sympathetic to some of their concerns about even down to bone structure. But ultimately, she says this is delusional self-loathing, and which is also something she says that particularly trans women can take part in as well, in terms of degrading your own body and seeking others who are going to give you supposedly hard truths about your physical appearance, because you're assume that any flattery must just be, empty lies, causes masochistic epistemology, whatever hurts is true. And of course, this is just reflects a personal insecurity, and psychologists would refer to this as digital self-harm. So basically concludes by saying that the solution has to be therapeutic, because it's, this is not something people have logic themselves into. And it's hard to tell how seriously to take the very end of it, but she suggests, I do think she suggests getting off of these sorts of forums, which I think is a suggestion, but also suggests taking up the guitar, which maybe means finding, other hobbies in general, which I think would be fair. But then ends on saying embracing the sea. I don't really know exactly how to take that, but in any case, as always, watch the whole video for yourself. So that's the video. Like I alluded to, I think this flows very well from two of our last artifacts, where we were talking about Gamergate. The whole red pill, black pill thing was definitely a big part of Gamergate as well. And this, specifically the idea of feminism having somehow changed society for the worst, and someone who views themselves as an incel is obviously going to be very easy to persuade them to this position of attacking these feminist game critics, particularly because they already sort of hate women. And the long-term goal of Gamergate, as we sort of discussed before, is kind of making women be more subservient to men, which is what these incels ultimately want. I'll say more later about why I think this video in particular is interesting. But I don't know if you have any. I'll let you go now, Alex, if you have any initial thoughts on it.
Well, I think videos like this are important because, kind of for like the Gamergate stuff too, because it's, for me, it's important to know enough about something that's so fucking stupid so that you can properly like mock it with well-informed roasts and using their proper language. Like wrist selling is fucking hilarious. Volcel, if you wouldn't, is like the top and bottom of every conversation. So goddamn funny, so funny.
Yes, they have, so like obviously incel, involuntary celibate, but they'll add the cell part of that to a lot of different prefixes. And yes, if the part of the video where she says volcel, if you wouldn't, obviously then would be voluntarily. Yeah, I mean, I left out the Stacy versus
Jesus.
um
Becky?
yeah, Stacy versus Becky part. That, I mean, yeah, just like, and even the Chad part, like, it's hard, like, you ultimately cannot talk about this issue without using some of their language, because there's not like, there's
Because
no.
it's so void of any reality.
Exactly, yes, it's so far down this rabbit hole that you are forced to use their own language and end up, you almost have to accept that you're going to sound kind of stupid talking about it, just because, yeah, it's like, I that, as I always just have to be like, quote unquote Chad, because it makes no sense. You just have to be like, this is the word they use to describe this thing that doesn't actually exist. So I guess I have to also use the word.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, it's like there's no other way to talk about this. So
I think like it's like weird because it's not what they want anyways, obviously based on like the way these fucking people think. But like theoretically, a proper application of like modern feminism would mean like more sex and sexually liberated people that are like happy to have like non-traditional relationships and like would mean more fucking. But what they really want is just like, I don't, more rape, I guess, on like government funded or employed girlfriends or whatever the fuck, and just like non-consensual, non-equal relationships. So like, the thing they're fighting should give them what they want.
yeah, it was interesting too. I think what they really want, it was interesting because I think it's also what Jordan Peterson talked about at one point, which, so it's kind of interesting that ContraPoints pointing out someone who could be helpful, but his whole enforced monogamy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I'm sure whatever he would probably say there's some sort of nuance to it, or I don't buy that, but whatever. But
Probably wearing a tuxedo.
but basically, it's just like, everyone. It's basically just like arranged marriages, sort of, but like arranged by like the state, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And the men.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what they would see as preferable, short of being able to like, psychologically control people's desires or something.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, it's all bad.
It's all bad.
One thing I was going to say about this video, though, is I feel like at the time it came out, it felt a lot more radical to me, and maybe it's just me, because I feel like at the time, a lot of the discourse around incels was pretty much just to make fun of them, and obviously they deserve to be this stupid. But I also think that if the point is to get them to stop identifying this way, then it probably will take a little bit more than just making fun of them. And I will disagree with you a little bit in terms of, I agree with you that feminism does offer some good solutions, although I think it's for slightly different reasons than you said. But I think ultimately, yes, it is going to be a matter of pointing out what actually thoughtful solutions to. I mean, their issue is that they are, like ContraPoint said, that they have this self-loathing issue, and that there are solutions to that, I believe. So pointing that, like, if these people's issue is that they are down on themselves, then just continuing to pile on is not necessarily going to help the issue, as as humorous as it might be to point out how stupid some of this stuff is.
But you don't want to risk becoming a hope cell, Justin.
But I do think, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, I feel like in the intervening 4 years since this video came out, I feel like that has become a little bit more of a mainstream position, to realize that just dunking on them is not really going to ameliorate the situation. But maybe I don't know. Maybe that's just my perception. I could be wrong.
I'm trying to think the last time I like heard somebody talk about like, or like discuss like incels with sort of like as much empathy as she has. I mean, I think it's I don't know. I think videos like that, kind of like we were saying, just sort of like getting an understanding of like the worldview, like helps sort of like talk to them on their terms, which helps for more productive conversations. But I'm not sure if the like zeitgeist is more like not just shitting on them. but it's so easy and so fun. You know what I mean? Like it's just there. You know, like so very rarely do somebody so loud and wrong all of the time as a group. You know what I mean?
Oh, there's definitely a lot of loud and roofs up there, but this is definitely, yeah, they definitely make themselves an easy target. But my favorite piece of writing on this topic is an article by Casey Ryan Kelly and Chase Onspach. I'm not sure if I pronounced the last name correctly there, but their article is called "Incels, Compulsory Sexuality, and Fascist Masculinity," which hits on a lot of the same points that ContraPoints did. But the point the article makes that I think is very good is that this point of compulsory sexuality, which is a term that comes out of the field of asexuality studies, but it's that this society is kind of imposing this idea that sex is the way to achieve happiness and intimacy, when in reality there's other ways to achieve those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that the incel discourse can really only make sense within this broader social discourse that sees masculinity and sexuality in this particular way. And it points out how incels are actually like reinforcing this idea that they are simultaneously claiming oppresses them,
Mm-hmm.
whereas they could actually be in a position to point out how there are other ways to achieve happiness, but they instead like just kind of like feed into these same narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But also that, you know, when we critique incels, it should be critiquing their basic premise,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just suggesting that there's different ways to achieve their desire. So basically, that's kind of where I'm disagreeing with you a little bit on
Mm-hmm.
at some point. I don't think we should suggest that like, oh, the incels could solve their problems by just having more sex or something, or by like advocating for a more sexually promiscuous society or something like that. I think it's actually de-emphasizing that they need to be like there's no reason to quote unquote black pill yourself and give up on life just because you're not currently in a sexual partnership or something like that.
Well, listen, my first and only social point will always just be more fucking, so that's fine. You are right that theoretically it shouldn't be. Well, if you just fucked, then you would realize it's A, not that big a deal, and B, like, fine. Like, you should feel a little better, but yeah, I mean, if you just got good at baking bread or made a good chair, read a decent book with some, like, a good cup of tea, maybe you can realize there's more to live for than just holes. I'm gonna say holes.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I won't go too long on the larger. Like, I feel like that was one of the. I feel like there's a lot of casual comments that was just like basically, oh, he didn't have to do what he did because he like looks decent and could have found a woman to like him back or something. I feel like people made a lot of those comments rather than questioning some of his underlying assumptions of like, well, you know, this isn't even whether or not he's quote unquote attractive is like completely irrelevant to the fact that you shouldn't kill people.
Yeah, okay. I can
And
get
then,
behind that.
yeah, so the last thing I'll just leave off on here is I think there's still some questions to be worked out that I don't know what exactly the answers will be. Well, it's interesting too because you don't not ever since the Supreme Court case made gay marriage legal, you've seen obviously
Oberfell v. Hodges, you fucking fake ally.
huh?
Oberfell v. Hodges, you fake ally. Know your sights.
But obviously, some of the there's been less need for the rhetoric to advocate for it because they, in some ways, they won that specific fight. Although obviously, there's still other things to fight for. But pre that, you saw a lot of this discourse around gay marriage that was like centered on everyone deserves love. Like that was definitely like a huge rallying cry.
Mm-hmm.
And like everyone could get behind that for gay marriage, but it's not exactly the same things that incels are saying, but they are kind of extrapolating that to the extreme to be like, everyone should be like state mandated with a partner or something.
Where's my love?
And I don't think we've ever like gone back and like actually hashed that out, which I think could make for an interesting. Yeah, I'd just be interested how people kind of reconcile those things. And then the other thing is, I also do think, and ContraPoint says make this point too, but it's hard to communicate with these people because most of these it's very easy for people who are in sexual relationships to be like, oh, it's not a big deal, it doesn't matter, whatever. They feel like they are not, you're so different from them that they're just not going to listen to you at that point. But I do think people have been kind of unwilling to think through that aspect as well of like, how do you convince someone who has not had a certain experience whether or not the experience is like worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously it's not worth killing people over or whatever, but that it's kind of like when and again, this is an imperfect analogy, but you'll see the point. But it's kind of like if someone who's rich tells you like money doesn't buy happiness or something, so like someone's living paycheck to paycheck, you're just gonna be like, screw you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the same, which is again not exactly the same, but the same feeling. I feel
right.
Like that also has not really been thought through carefully. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
So you're not blackpilled yet?
I would say no. All right, well, that's all for my artifact. Alex, what do you got for us?
So my artifact is a Rolling Stone article from November 2019 titled "That Uplifting Tweet You Just Shared, Troll Just Sent It." Oh, Jesus. I really don't want to... A lot of read. That uplifting tweet you just shared? A Russian troll sent it, because there's a question mark. Reading's important. With the subheading, here's what Russia's 2020 disinformation operation looks like, according to two experts on social media propaganda. This is written by Darren Linville and Patrick Warren. We kind of try to have a rule here about, like, you don't pick a bad article just to roast it. It's going to be about a 50-50, 75-25 here about some of the things that this is said, but I think it's somewhat important. There's something to be said here about, like, social media, Twitter, and what Russia may or may not be doing, but also just sort of, like, the general, I think, like, a good look at, like, the, like, I don't even know what you'd call it, the moderate liberal position on the 2016, like, election or some shit. Just, like, getting into that, like, mind sphere of the authors. First things first, the article is definitely co-written by an economics and communication professors. That's point one. But they start with saying that internet trolls don't troll, not the professionals at least. Professional trolls don't go on social media to antagonize liberals or belittle conservatives. They are not narrow-minded, drunk, or angry. They don't lack basic English language skills. They certainly aren't, quote, somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, unquote, as the president once put it. Your stereotypical trolls do exist on social media, but the amateurs aren't a threat to Western democracy. Professional trolls are the tip of the spear in a new digital ideological battleground. To combat the threat they pose, we must first understand them and take them seriously. And so the article continues with an example of one of these alleged accounts at I'm Tyra Jackson. This account received 290,000 likes on Twitter for a single tweet. And the tweet's about a pair of images of a former professional football player, work done, and a description of inspiring charity work building houses for single mothers. And the article says the authors write that the purpose of the Tyra account, we believe, was not to spread heartwarming messages to Americans. Rather, the tweet about what work done was really a Trojan horse to gain followers in a larger plan by a foreign adversary. The at I'm Tyra Jackson is actually an account operated by the successors to the Russia's Internet Research Agency, henceforth referred to as the IRA. Special counsel Robert Mueller indicted the IRA after the 2016 election for waging a massive information war during the election. Since then, the IRA seems to have subsumed into Russian federal news agency, but its work continues. They write that the IRA's goal was twofold: to grow an audience in part through heartwarming, inspiring messages, and then to use the following to spread messages promoting division, distrust, and doubt. The example that they give, or that they say, is that professional trolls know that you catch more flies with honey, and they don't go on social media looking for a fight. They go looking for new best friends, and they found them. Disinformation in this capacity is most often simply spin. So somebody should get Bill O'Reilly on the phone to get the no spin zone back. But spin is hard to spot and easy to believe, especially if you're already inclined to do so. While the rest of the world learns to conduct a modern disinformation campaign from Russia, it is from the world of public relations and advertising the IRA learned their craft, so presumably America. But to appreciate the influence of potential Russian disinformation, we need to view them less as Boris and Natasha and more like Don Draper. And so the second example of a Russian account that they identified is @PoliteMelanie, which recrafted an old urban legend, tweeting, quote, "My cousin studied sociology in university. Last week, she and her classmates polled over 1,000 conservative Christians. What would you do if you discovered that your child was a Homo sapien? 55% said they would disown them and force them to leave their homes. This tweet, which suggests that conservatives are not only homophobic but also ignorant, was subtle enough to not feel overtly hateful, but also aimed directly at the multiple cultural stress points, driving a wedge to the point where religiosity and ideology meet, saying that the tweet is successful, and that the tweet didn't seek to anger Christian conservatives or to provoke Trump supporters because she wasn't talking to them, and that Melanie's 20,000 followers weren't from #MAGA. Rather, they were an audience of educated urban left-wing Americans harboring a touch of self-righteousness," concluding that anger drives people to the polls while disgust drives countries apart, which is the ultimate goal. And then it sort of, you read an article and then they kind of just start showing their ass, Justin. When they talk about what effective disinformation looks like, importantly, that the IRA, or the new face of what used to be the IRA, will highlight issues of race and gender inequality. And there were tweets about Brock Turner's Stanford rape case received 15,000 likes, and others about police targeting black citizens in Las Vegas views more than 100,000 times. And here's what makes the disinformation so difficult to discuss, says the authors. While these tweets point to valid issues or concerns, issues have been central to important social movements like Black Lives Matter and Me Too. They are framed to serve Russia's interest in undermining America's trust in our institutions. More on that later. And then continuing with, these accounts also harness the goodwill they've built by engaging these communities for specific political ends. Consistent with part Russian activity, they attacked moderate politicians as a method of bolstering more polarizing candidates. Recently, Vice President Joe Biden, as this was written in 2019, has been the most frequent target of this strategy, and seen in dozen tweets such as "Joe Biden is damaging Obama's legacy with his racism and stupidity, and Joe Biden doesn't deserve our votes." More on that later. They talk about all of the different social media sites that they've been on. They found trolls on Instagram, Stitcher, Reddit, Google+, Tumblr, Medium, Vine, Meetup, and even Pokemon Go. The IRA has been called a troll farm, but they are undoubtedly a factory, which isn't good writing, but I just want to throw that out there. And so the ultimate conclusion of these people is that, these two professors, is that we need to teach individuals of all ages that we shouldn't simply believe or repost anonymous users because they are the same hashtag, they use the same hashtag as we did, and neither should we accuse them of being a Russian bot simply because we disagree with their perspective. More on that later. People need to be taught digital civility. More on that later. The final sort of follow-up of where we are now and what's happened since 2016 is that Russian disinformation is not just about President Trump or the 2016 election. Did they work to get Trump elected? Yes, diligently. So says the article. Our research has shown how Russians strategically employed social media to build support on the right for Trump and lower voter turnouts on the left for Clinton. The IRA was not created to collude with the Trump campaign. They existed well before Trump rode down the escalator, announced his candidacy, and we assume they will exist in some form well after he is gone. It's not about the election of 2016 or 2020. The IRA generated more social media content in the years following the 2016 election than the year before it. Their work was never just about elections. Rather, the IRA encourages us to vilify our neighbor and amplify our differences. Because if we grow incapable of compromising, there can be no more meaningful democracy. Russia has dug in for a long campaign. So far, we're helping them with it. So I think it's good for two reasons. One, I think it sort of helps post like Mueller report and how nothing actually happened and Trump lost, like how, I don't know, everybody was, how do I want to put this? Russia pilled, maybe? About the election, and then now this new influx of Russian phobia that we're experiencing today with the Ukraine stuff. Just that, like, the existence of, like, Russia is a big bad, and then also how everything's kind of their fault. But I have points to make, but Justin, I'll let you sort of say what you want to say.
My thought is always that you learn a lot more from something that's good than something that's bad. But I don't think this. Okay, so this is the worst artifact we've ever covered. I feel confident saying that, but I don't think this one is all bad, and I think we may agree on the points it hits that are worth thinking about. Yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder here, so I'll that's just where I'll say my point is just that this is the worst artifact we've done, but I'll let you say what you want to say first.
Listen, audience. I sent it to him knowing. I said this is pretty bad, but it's short, and if it's not worth doing, say as much. And he said nothing. His silence is complicit. All right, that's the first thing to get out of the way. How dare you? I will pull up the text message right now. There's definitely somebody here in some parts show its age, but it would definitely be a combative article. Let me know what you think. It's not terribly long to read, so you won't have time to say.
I really did read that anyway.
All right. Literally didn't read it. Anyway. Well, the first thing is like the sort of how aggressively like moderate liberal this is about, like the more polarizing candidates, presumably putting Bernie and like Trump on the same like rank, sort of with that one offline that they amateurs aren't a threat to Western democracy, but trolls are. And I guess the threat is that we grow incapable of compromising. I'm not exactly sure what we aren't able to compromise on, but presumably human rights and dignity of the lower class citizens, things that are prevalent in most other societies considered Western, quote unquote, Western democracy, such as sort of the borderline things of healthcare and public college that Bernie stands on. So I'm not exactly sure where the threat is there. Disinformation is simply spin, such as the spin of Brock Turner's rape case and police targeting of black citizens. I wonder what would and wouldn't be cut a year later in November of 2020. And these are valid issues, but it's actually Russia's fault that America's institutions have lost trust as opposed to America's institutions being untrustworthy. Interestingly, also the article, there isn't an instance of what right-wing focused trolling would be, which is definitely a choice on a not terribly long article with only 2 examples, both of being like, this one's meant to sort of lure people in, presumably liberals, because it's focusing on a black athlete, but even still just anybody. And then the urban legend tweet was to focus on liberals. The writing in this article is just mostly bad. The biggest last thing is that there's 3 hyperlinks in this entire article. One of them is the president saying that trolls are somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds. The second one is about digital civility, which links to another article they wrote for Times Higher Education, where students need to learn how trolls and bots disrupt division. And within the first article, they say that 75% or something like that of all people that were tricked by fake news were boomers. So, interesting article title, which in that article has another link where digital civility is hyperlinked, and that leads to a different article written by them in March. And then the third hyperlink is that they did research about how Russia strategically employed. The article hyperlink attaches to sciencedirect.com, which is free to register for, but it would cost $9.50 for me to rent the contents of that research for 24 hours.
I was able to read that one. It was a little bit hard to follow because they kept conflating left and liberal. There was one part where they said that the trolls that were attacking Hillary Clinton were attacking the left, and it just got like, so I had to constantly be like translating and it's weird too because they know the difference, because they'll talk about, even in this article, how they think the trolls are attacking moderate positions so that they can elevate people on both ends. So then to then be like, oh, the attacks on Clinton were attacks on the left is kind of strange. They make the claim that the trolls are pro-Trump, but they really seem to downplay. Yeah, they're almost equally pro and anti-Trump, but just somewhat again on balance pro-Trump, and that's what they're linking to is as their claim to like prove that the trolls helped Trump win. So I don't really think that gets borne out. And they also they make a correlation which they kind of try to imply as causal between the trolls and increased polarization. Like they basically say they have a quote from someone else saying polarization now is greater than it was in the 1990s, and then they right after that they say and these trolls are here now. They're not so bold as to be like to just state outright that they're claiming causation, but they're trying to get you to be like, all right, if we put these two things together, they'll think one is causing the other. Oh, and in addition to that, also pointing out that people see these troll tweets. Like they have numbers to suggest that people like see and remember having seen these troll tweets, but they also don't attempt to prove that people were persuaded one way or another by them as well. But they put all those facts together and hope that you'll think people like, oh, if they see them and if they are polarizing and if we're more polarized now than before, then it must be because of the trolls, but it's not actually borne out anywhere. But that's what the research they linked to said. But anyways, I did want to touch on their definition of troll. Troll used to mean just like someone who was
purposefully antagonistic.
Not even like antagonistic, but just like not being serious. Like
that's true.
Antagonistic, but they could also just be like the moon is made of cheese or something.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
And like they're just basically not to be taken seriously, but seeing if someone will take them seriously just for the laughs or whatever. And then from there, it kind of turned into like, oh, it's someone who is like spreading misinformation, sort of, and like if you were to say the moon is made of cheese, that's technically like a lie. And so then it kind of also switch into like, well, who's doing most of the lying? It's like these like racists and Nazis and stuff. So now troll suddenly means Nazi, which is not what it used to mean at all. But that's how we ended up. But they go even a step further to just be like, a troll is anyone who is not who they say they are, even if what they're saying is true. If you look at these, they count I am Tyra Jackson at Polite Melanie. They never claim that their tweets themselves are trolling. They just say that the accounts are troll accounts because they're not representing themselves accurately. And to me, that's just such a stretching of what troll means to beyond any sort of recognition of what it was originally meant to be. And like, how many people could we classify as troll if that is if the definition is just you're not who you say you are? To me, it's more just like they're not accurately representing who they are. But that is so many accounts. Like there's way more accounts that are pseudonymous or anonymous than are have the blue check mark next to them. So like most of what you see online are troll accounts, if this is how far we're stretching the definition. And the fact that they don't ever stop, like to them it's like they have to focus on Russia to the point where they don't think about what they're actually saying could apply more broadly.
I know this isn't a good article. I know it's not helpful, but isn't the dunk better? Isn't it more fun sometimes?
Oh, I mean, it's always fun to dunk, but that's what we have the safe room for. Which is not my cue to transition there, but.
But listen, also, I don't know, a lot of people think this all the time. This was like all of like the back half of 2010 discourse.
Yeah, part of the reason I was okay with going with this one is because this has become so... I don't even know if this was like the original article or if this was just kind of like in that trend of articles coming out about this stuff. But it's just like, yeah, it's like if you don't agree with the liberal consensus, then you are a troll or a bot, which makes no sense except for in this framing where, yes, technically you are a troll or a bot because if you don't have a blue check mark and you don't support Joe Biden, then you're indistinguishable from a troll or a bot based on this definition. So that's why I thought it was okay to go back to it, because you can kind of see where that comes from, as stupid and destructive as that is. This is where that logic comes from.
I remember sitting in the middle of like a law class talking about the law, and people are like, Robert Mueller is gonna like absolutely like upturn the whole presidency and like save American democracy with like this like research paper.
The useful thing this article does point out is that I agree with the narrow point that we should be more skeptical of certain things. I actually do remember seeing that tweet. My cousin is studying sociology in university tweet, which has my hold on, let me has the same vibes as my cousin's friend in Trinidad.
But now that's classic.
But I also am like, well, what's the problem? Like, okay, so this tweet is not true, but what is the actual problem beyond that? That's making us think that conservative Christians are homophobic? Is that not true?
Right.
Which, I mean, you already kind of made the point, but it's like, why? Like, to them, this tweet is bad because it might make people even more strongly reject homophobia, which in their minds is bad because we have to be willing to compromise on homophobia, which is just, I mean, once you say it out loud, it's just like the most deplorable that you could imagine.
You're, instead of just that, just a more general critiquing of like Christian conservatives are either lack critical thinking or are so dumb as to not know what a homo sapien is. Like, I feel like is their stance on homosexuality also just not sort of on that same tier of like baby brain? You're not so stupid as to not know what a homo sapien is, but you still would kick out your son if they were homosexual. So like, well, I don't like, does it matter? Like, is that distinction relevant? And also, like you said with the trolls, like, what if even 30% of the people that like that tweet just liked it because they thought it was like an unserious shit post? You know what I mean? Like, why does it have to be like, I like it because it makes me feel better as a liberal, as opposed to like, that's funny?
Yeah, there's no attempt to like think critically about how people engage with online content.
There is one more hyperlink, which is just the word race, and importantly, they highlighted issues of race and gender equality, which links to an NBC article, which is also talks with Darren Linville. So they've 3 out of 4 of their hyperlinks are just more to their own work. With the article, Russian-linked Twitter accounts promoted doxing over racial tension videos, and it's just a collection of the fact that Russians shared videos of like what are now like considered like Karens caught on camera, like led to more disruption. But like there are real videos of Americans acting racistly. So like, what? It's not like a deep fake. You know what I mean? Like, so they just shared a video that somebody else posted anyways. That happened to them. Like, it's you still did a hate crime. Like, what do you mean?
I mean, you said it too, but that's just what I said. It's like,
right.
It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just, does the person who's posting it, are they accurately representing who they are? Just such a strange premise to sort of have, as is literally just attack the messenger. Basically. But yeah, it is. Yeah, it's also interesting too. I don't know exactly what to make, but the fact that they are so like these Russian accounts are talking about race so much because it's something that is actually a problem in America.
Right.
But the authors are like, oh, the fact that the messenger is bad means that race is not, racism is not a problem in America. Like, again, it's kind of unclear exactly where you're supposed to go from that logic.
It's all spin, Justin. You don't get it. Racism exists in a vacuum, and to talk about us right now that we don't have an accent, clearly it's what we have to say is fine until we try to politicize racism. Don't, Justin. It's just immutable. It's inherent. I don't know how to not spin racism in a way that would be satisfactory to these people at Clemson.
Yeah, where the article shows its hand a little bit. I mean, yeah, towards the end it just totally shows its hand. But Yeah. Okay, so it says like, here's what makes disinformation so difficult to discuss. While these tweets point to valid issues of concern, they are framed to serve Russia's interest in undermining Americans' trust in their institutions. So it's like, that's really, for them, that's it. Like, if you, anything that's basically undermining trust in institutions, even if those institutions are bad,
Mm-hmm.
is just inherently bad itself. Like, they just come out and say that, which is just like a deeply political position. And I also think it's really, if you really think about it, like, what they're trying to do is not that far off from what they're accusing the Russian troll accounts of doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to control what people see online for explicitly political purposes. So it's kind of like, okay, if you're both trying to control what information gets seen online for political purposes, the only way to square it is if you just assume that America, as it is, must be defended no matter what. Yeah, they also have this assumption baked in throughout that, like, if they don't, I don't think they say Bernie's name specifically,
Mm-mm.
but basically, like, if Bernie won, that would aid in destroying America, because they're like, Russia's like propping up these candidates on the left in an attempt to destroy America, but they never say that's a miscalculation on Russia's part,
Right.
which implies that maybe they agree with it. This is really lengthy. I think a much better conclusion from the evidence that they do present is just that these Russian accounts are trying to make money from selling ads. Like, it seems like they're posting stuff that will get attention. That's
And then,
why
like,
they're posting polarizing stuff.
did you read the other article about digital civility that they hyperlinked? In that article, they're talking about other troll factories. They named 2 countries. If you want to guess, and then I'll tell you what they are, and you're gonna have it'll be good.
I'm gonna guess China's gotta be one of them. I will guess India.
Iran and Venezuela.
Oh wow. Okay. Oh man. All right. Well, now that we're in the safe room, Alex, what do you have on your mind?
What I have in my mind, and this is gonna keep up with our dating of things of being too late, but I think this might go in the corner of people have lost the phrase, what retired phrases. Do we have a name for that we were doing? We were talking about things that you like, people like have lost the right to use because they misuse it too much. But I'm officially vouching for the retirement of the phrase "life isn't fair," and the reason.
So because life is fair.
That's the reason is because life is fair. That's why that's the name of my yacht. Is life is fair. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is related to, I think you've said that we're 2 Buffalo boys before. I don't know, maybe not. If not, both of us, or at least me, preferred sports team is the Buffalo Bills for one reason or another. And in the playoffs this year, they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime, which was like, that game has been, I think, collectively regarded and will continue to be like one of the best games in NFL history, with the back and forth and the just quick scoring and stacking and matching in the last 2.5 minutes of regulation time. And it's been a problem. It continues to be. The only problem with the NFL is the overtime rules, actually. Otherwise, a completely flawless system. Shout out Browns quarterback situation. But the rule is that first possession, score a touchdown, you win automatically. Field goal, the other team gets a chance to score a field goal. And after that, first team to score it all wins. And the Kansas City Chiefs gets the ball first on a coin flip, and then they win immediately. And there was a couple of commentators, but one specifically that was just like, "Why?" And everybody's calling for the rule change. Basically, the majority of people are calling for the rule change. There's a number of overtime games and stuff. And Kansas City lost the week after that to an overtime game. People are calling for a change to the overtime rules. Is it finally time to give each team the ball at least once? And somebody's like, "What? No, life isn't fair. You just get to get the ball back." And it's like, this is a regulated thing of rules. It's not. This isn't life. The 2 problems with life isn't fair is A, people saying life isn't fair when talking about things that are have rules and are regulated, and the just like completely contained system where the rules are made and changed at the whim of people. Because the point of life isn't fair is it's like the fact that there's like millions of nuances and arbitrary decisions that people make that have ripples and aftershocks on people like completely unintentionally unrelated and almost exclusively are like unforeseen and untraceable. Like, you can't count on everything to like work out the way you want, but it's not like an apathetic like dictator of just like whatever it is and continues to happen. That's just life isn't fair. It's like and it's also not meant to be used as like some like absolute like final dunk by teachers when like legitimate questions and grievances are asked about like a seating order at lunch with like from like middle schoolers. Like, it's just there are so many things that like can be made better, and it's just like, no, well, life isn't fair, so starve. Like, nobody said it would be easy, right, kid? Like, it's just people can't use it anymore. It's just been abused to no end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely like a stripping of agency that happens where it's like, I don't know, it's almost like quasi-religious of like, well, this is just how life was made and us humans cannot control it. And it's like, yeah, you could literally just like rewrite that one rule and change it like
right.
completely. Yeah, I actually can't even think of the last time I've heard.
Let me know for the rest of our lives the next time somebody says life isn't fair, and it isn't just because they're being an asshole.
Yeah, because usually it's like to silence a critique or something. Actually, this just came to me now, so maybe this doesn't actually make sense. But is it similar to let people enjoy things?
Maybe it might be in the same, like the antithesis, or like Half Brother, perhaps. More research is needed. It's definitely used as like a weird catch-all to like excuse, for example, if there's like a new video game coming out about quelling a minority uprising about the unfair treatment, and you're playing as the cop. And you're like, oh, but I want to be a boy wizard. Ooh, just let me enjoy it. Ooh, there's no politics here. This is just the only book I've read since I was 10. That's not my fault. Or something. That's just off the dome. That's a hypothetical.
And you always are making me work with those end notes. I actually ran out of characters. I couldn't put all the end notes in the last episode. But, yes, I can't think of the last time I heard life isn't fair in good faith. I'd be fine. I can't remember the last time I've used it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, think of like people that you like know that use that phrase, or like want to keep talking to them.
I don't think anyone who's ever actually been trying to make things better has used the phrase.
Because, like, otherwise you'd be like, yeah, sometimes it just sucks and things don't work out. It's not like, well, life isn't fair. That's why I get to steal all your money, and I don't have to pay taxes. Suck it.
We all remember MLK's famous "Life Isn't Fair" speech.
I had a dream that life was fair, and I said, yeah, right. And I woke up. Fat chance. Knew I was dreaming. But so yeah, that's I vouch for another phrase in the recycling bin. But what's on your mind, Justin?
Yeah, my say from this week is just that we need to bring back hobbies. This stems from a video I recently watched. If you want to watch it, it's called "Solving the Debate Bro Problem" by Noah Samson. Yeah, but it's just about these people whose like full-time jobs is streaming videos of them. It seems like they play video games and debate people. Like I guess they like schedule, or they're streaming from like 9 to 5, like a regular work day, and then it's like, oh, at 2 o'clock I'll debate this person. And then, like, the rest of the day I'll play Elden Ring or something. Anyways, I don't really care what people do for their money, like as long as they're not hurting anyone. Arguably, these people are hurting people,
right?
But whatever. I don't, do whatever works for you. But my point is, I learned how large these people's audiences are, and I was just struck by how many people were watching them, kind of sitting at their computer and rambling about whatever popped into their heads. I don't know why that would be something you would want on the background, something you would want to like pop in and out of. And yeah, like you said, this does kind of stem from my artifact this week as well, of seeing how these incels go down such a rabbit hole. And it's like, I can only conclude that people don't have enough hobbies. So I'm willing to attribute this to a lot of things, mostly capitalism. It's hard to have hobbies when you're constantly being told to have a side hustle. But that's a boring answer. I also think the computer might have something to do with it too. Just because pre-computer, you had to have a diverse array of things to entertain yourself with. Like if you go outside, read a book, hang out with a friend or whatever. All these were discrete things that you had to do separately. Now on the computer, it's just like you can just do everything without even standing up. Like you could switch from watching a video to listening to music to playing games to reading a book to writing a letter, email, whatever, all without ever standing up from your computer chair. And in some sense, sure, you could also like sit on your couch and watch TV or listen to the radio all day. So it's not a completely new problem, but it still seems to have exacerbated it and perhaps stretched the point of when you would normally get bored to, some wild degree. So yeah, that's the only way I can imagine why people are turning into a live stream, is just because they don't have anything actual to do. So I'm just encouraging people to do something, preferably something outside, maybe something that's social. Yeah, ending these parasocial relationships and this weird thinking about femoids and chads that you can only get to when you've fallen down a bizarre rabbit hole.
When I found out not even a month ago that Ben Shapiro's like podcast talk show was daily, my mouth dropped. I was on the floor. That much time for nothing. Half the time, nothing. Is in like both for him and the people that listen every day to Ben Shapiro. I don't listen to anybody every day. What?
I can't imagine listening to something unedited. That's why it's like so important to me that we edit this podcast. Is because I'm like, I hate, even if it's something that's pre-recorded or whatever. Like if it's not edited, I'm just like, come on, like you gotta cut out all the fat, like. Because if I want, I'm going to something to like get something from it, not just to like hear the first thing that popped into your mind, unedited, unfiltered. Like I could get that from anyone. Like again, just make friends, and you can hear your friends' unedited, unfiltered thoughts, and they're actually your friends. Why are you tuning in to this random person online to just give the thoughts off the top of their head? Like,
and this is not necessarily relevant and probably useless, but I will say that when I typed in on my notes app Safe Room, it autocorrected to Sage Room. So game recognized game Apple. That's huge of them, actually. That feels like almost like a advert from them.
It means they've been listening to the show.
Yeah.
Yes, the most sage advice.
Hey man, I would come to the top of the mountain to hear this.
I mean, be safe. The pandemic. Probably by the time you hear this, will be in the 5th or 6th wave of the pandemic. But so be safe. But you can still find other stuff to do.
Well, that's our show. You can see the show notes for a link to view the artifacts for yourself and view the endnotes.
Artwork by JAS Art Studios. Music produced by Nicholas Pizzuto.
Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and tell a friend or enemy about the show. Join us again in 3 weeks as we find 2 new texts to discuss.
Proud of you for finding your own this week, even though it was the worst artifact we've ever done. But
yeah, that's my signature, Justin. That's how they know that I picked it.
That's true.